is going on YouTube? So coming back with my cornerback version of the NFL Big Board, or NFL Draft Big Board. So going to be doing the format of top 12 and then 5 outside. So overall doing my top 17. So go ahead and start with number 1. And for the most part, I think he's the default number 1. I mean, I know there's a few people that I have him mixed up with Jalen Ramsey and Mackenzie Alexander, but I've got Vernon Hargreaves, the 5'11", 192-pounder out of Florida. So for me, Vernon Hargreaves has been the clear-cut number 1 since the beginning of the year. He formed what I think was the best 1-2 punch at corner in the country with Jalen Tabor. Hargreaves is a guy for me that really can keep up with anyone. He is one of the best pure cover corners in college football. Had 4 interceptions this year. A lot of times he was just thrown away from, though. So really the only team he got beaten by this year was against Alabama. He was covering Calvin Ridley. But I genuinely believe Calvin Ridley's going to be a first-round pick in a couple of years. Maybe even a top 10 pick. So I think Hargreaves has the measurables to be able to cover really... I mean, he's not the tallest guy, but to really cover anyone in the NFL. He runs a solid 40 at 4.4, which obviously is very fast. And for me, he projects as a top 5 pick for me. I don't think he'll make it outside of the top 5. I know a few people think that's going to be really high, but that's where I think he'll go. So move on to my number 2 corner, and I've got the 6'1", 204-pounder out of Florida State, Jalen Ramsey. Now, Jalen Ramsey might be the most versatile corner in this draft. He definitely can play either cornerback or safety. He played both while he was at Florida State. And I think that he is, like I said, I think he's going to be one of the best players in the NFL out of this draft. I think he's one of the best picks you can make, just stability-wise. I don't think there's much of a chance of him being a bust. He's got good measurables, decent speed, runs a 4.5 40. For me, he projects as a top 10 pick. Excuse me. I don't think he's going to make it outside of the top 10. I think he can fit in well with any team that needs a corner or a safety, like I said. Got very good intangibles, decent measurables. He's got good size. So, like I said, don't think he'll make it out of the first round. So move on to my number 3 corner. And I've got the 5'11", 195-pounder out of Clemson, and that's Mackenzie Alexander. So Mackenzie Alexander's been up and down when it comes to draft stock. So I don't know if returning for his junior season would have been a good idea. I think if he had done that, though, he would have been the number 1 corner coming out next year. But like I said, I still think he's going to be a first-round pick. I've read things. I've read some sites even. Excuse me, not feeling too good today. I've read some sites even have him going as far as the 2nd, 3rd round. I don't think he's going to fall out of the first round. He's got very good measurables. He's a very athletic corner. He's a good cover corner, and I think that he's going to end up going in the middle of the first round. I think that's probably the place where he's going to fall. Alright, to move on to my number 4 corner, and I have the 5'11", 195-pounder out of Virginia Tech, Kendall Fuller. So I think coming into the year, Kendall Fuller was one of the top 2 or 3 corners in the draft. I think for me, he's still top 4. I am going in the late first or early second round. I think that I'm just going to go ahead and tell you guys who my next one is. I think him and Eli Apple are about even, though. I think both of them are going to be late first, early second round picks. Some people say Eli Apple's better. I think that Kendall Fuller's got a higher ceiling. I just think he had a bad year. He didn't play great this year. Just also he had an MCL sprain that kept him out of much of the year. Like I said, just not a fun year for Kendall Fuller. But I think a full off season, maybe a good focus in the NFL can get him back on track. For me, he's got good measurables. Runs about a 4.4 to a 4.5 40. A little bit more on the latter half of that. But he's a guy that really, like I said, didn't have a great year. That did hurt his draft stock. And really before this year, he had been known as one of the better shutdown corners playing for a good Virginia Tech defense. So move on to my number 5 corner. And I have the 6'1", 198-pounder out of Ohio State, Eli Apple. So I mentioned him before. I have Eli Apple going in the late first, early second round. I could see him falling anywhere as high as 20, though. In my I believe in my mock draft I had him going around 20. It was around 25 to 28. But I think that Eli Apple is a solid corner. I think it would have benefited him to stay another year at Ohio State. Again, a lot like Mackenzie Alexander, I think he would have been one of the top 2 corners coming out next year if he had stayed another year. But anyhow, I think he'll still fall pretty high in the draft. And yeah, I think he was the best corner for Ohio State this year, and look forward to be a pretty good secondary between him and Von Bell. Alright, so move on to my number 6 corner. And I've got the 6 foot, 197 pounder out of Miami, Artie Burns. So, I think I mentioned this before in some of my other videos. And obviously, in the rankings, there's normally some drop off between for me, between the late first rounders and then the mid second, maybe early third rounders. And for me, that's right here. I still think Artie Burns is a solid corner. He's got decent measurables. He had a pretty good year this year, 6 interceptions, 36 tackles. And I think he's going to, like I said, I think he's going to end up going in the, I'd probably say late second round. Like I said, I think there's kind of a drop off there. But again, runs about a 4.5, so he's got decent speed. He's got good size too, so I think he can end up being a guy that could get a chance to start in the NFL. So move on to my number 7 corner, and I've got the 6'2", 175-pounder out of Houston, William Jackson. So Jackson's one of the more lanky players in this draft. I think he's got to fill out his frame a little bit more. He was a good, very, very good cover corner this year, had really good ball skills, and I think that if he's able to develop, he's one of the guys that could have one of the higher upsides in this draft. Good Senior Bowl for him, I think, could do wonders. Again, I think he's one of the more shaky draft stocks. If he shows potential, shows that he'll be able to fill out his frame, then I think he could maybe slide up as high as an early second round pick. Alright, so move on to my number 8 corner. So I've got the 6'1", 213-pounder out of Samford, and that's James Bradbury. So Bradbury's got very, very, very good set of measurables. Got good size, got good speed as well. Runs about a 4.45 40, and I think that obviously him playing at Samford didn't help. But like I said, he's got very, very good athleticism. One of the most athletic corners in this draft. I think he'll end up falling late second, early third round. I do have him overall projected as a second or third round pick though. All right, so move on to my number 9 corner. And I have the 6'2", 200-pounder out of Baylor, Xavier Howard. So Xavier Howard is the primary corner for Baylor this year. Actually played pretty well in my opinion. He's one of the more athletic guys in the draft. Can really go up and snatch it from really anyone. Like I said, watching him this year was pretty impressive. Played well against North Carolina in the Russell Athletic Bowl. And he put up decent stats this year. 5 interceptions. About 42 tackles. I have him going as a third, fourth round pick. I think middle fourth round would be the desired spot for him. Again, I think there's a drop off between Bradbury and Howard though, and I think there's a little bit of a log jam in the third, fourth round for for cornerbacks. So move on to my number 10 corner, and I've got the 6'2", 195-pounder out of Virginia, Maurice Kennedy. So guy that probably didn't show out very well, or maybe didn't get the credit he deserved playing for Virginia. Not a very good football team, but he does get an invitation to the Senior Bowl. If he has a good Senior Bowl, good combine, I think he'll be a guy that can slide up a little bit in the draft. He's a very physical corner. Got good size and length. I just don't think that he's got the speed to measure up to a lot of the corners around him. Runs maybe about a late 4.5, 4.6 40. So, like I said, doesn't measure up to a lot of the other corners, but I still have him going as a third, fourth round pick. So, move on to my number 11 corner in the draft, and I have the 6 foot, 185-pounder out of Mississippi State, Will Redmond. So, I think Redmond's a guy who can slide up a little bit in the draft. I think he's got a decent amount of upside. He's an athletic guy that had a little bit of injury problems this year. Runs a decent 40, about a 4.5 flat, and if he can maybe put on 5 pounds, I think that could help him out a little bit. Versatile corner, can play in the slot or on the outside. Like I said, I think he goes as a third, fourth round pick. All right, so move on to my number 12 corner. I've got the 5'11", 175-pounder out of OU, and that's Zach Sanchez. So Zach Sanchez, one of the bigger names in this list. Really didn't have a great year this year. Got burned quite a bit, it seemed, but I think he's a guy that maybe got a lot. I keep on saying this. I think that he was not the best. I don't think he was even the best guy in the secondary for OU this year. I think that was Jordan Thomas, a guy who will probably be first or second round pick in the future out of OU. But like I said, I think that he does have good ball skills. He's got good hands. 7 interceptions this year, 45 tackles, and really just the guy that I think if he can, if he finds a coach that can get his head on straight, then I think a guy that has a lot of potential in the NFL. Not the fastest guy, not the biggest guy, but like I said, a guy that has pretty good ball skills, got good hands as well. Alright, so moving to my 5 outside. I don't know, I put my notes away there. So these are guys I think will be going in the 4th round and later. So first I've got the 6-foot, 197-pounder out of West Virginia, Darrell Worley. So Worley was kind of cast into the spotlight this year after Carl Joseph went down with a season-ending injury and played pretty well. I believe he had 6 picks, so that's good. Not the greatest measurables. He's got okay size, a little bit slow, runs about a 4.6 flat 40. But again, a guy who I think will probably fall 4th round, maybe a little bit later. So move on to my next in the 5 outside. I've got the 6'2", 190-pounder out of Northern Iowa, DeAndre Hall. So Hall's got good size for me, maybe a guy that could put on 5 pounds, but he's got decent speed. One of the more athletic guys. I think a good Senior Bowl turnout, since he was an FCS player, could definitely do him wonders. A guy that's got a lot of potential to be a good NFL corner if he can, like I said, if he can get the right exposure. So move on to my next on the 5 outside. I've got the 5'11", 190-pounder out of Notre Dame. That's Kavari Russell. So I think Russell's a guy that could end up going a little bit higher in the draft. Excuse me. He's a guy that's got pretty good measurables. He's a pretty fast guy, especially considering the guys I have him around. He runs about a 4.45 to 4.5 flat 40. And I think a guy that's a pretty good cover corner as well. I think a guy that if he has a good Senior Bowl, good combine, then a guy that could fall maybe a little bit early in the draft, maybe going as high as the early 3rd round, but again, a guy that's got another shaky draft stock. Really a lot of the guys after ranking of 12 to 13, just it's hard to put an exact number on them. You're going to need to see a little bit more out of the pro days and combine before really putting the corners into an exact ranking. There's a lot of guys that have a pretty high upside, which makes it actually a pretty intriguing cornerback draft class. So move on to my next one, and I've got the 6'1", 180-pounder out of Southeastern Louisiana, and that's Harlan Miller. So a guy who's very productive in his 4 years at Southeastern Louisiana, but I think it'll be another guy that could use a big spotlight on him in a game like the Senior Bowl. And again, a guy that's got another pretty shaky draft stock. He's a little bit slower than some of the other guys I have around him, but still runs about a 4.55 40, so not extremely slow. He's got decent size too at 6'1". So move on to my last one, and maybe the most troubled corner in the draft, and that is the 6'1", 193-pounder out of LSU, Rashard Robinson. So Robinson's got really a ton of potential. Guy that runs about a 4.5 flat 40. He's extremely athletic. Good cover corner, but just ran into a lot of trouble at LSU. Multiple arrests, suspensions, that's even breaking into his own teammate's apartment. A guy that I think will probably fall either 7th round or undrafted, but I just wanted to mention him because I think if he had stayed out of trouble at LSU, he could have gone as high as maybe being a 2nd round pick. So again, a guy that's very, very talented, but just ran into a lot of trouble. Maybe this year's I'm not saying same story, but maybe this year's Lael Collins. If some team can find him and then get him right. So like I said, that's pretty much it. I will be coming back to you tomorrow with my last video. I might do special teams. I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, so drawn to the end of the big board. If you did not see my video yesterday, I'll put the entire link to the playlist in the description below, as well as some of the videos in the outro. So that's pretty much it. See ya. What is going on, YouTube? So coming back with my edge rusher / defensive end big board. So this is going to include both defensive ends, obviously, and then also like edge rush specialists, and like maybe like a Leonard Floyd type is a good example.